Welcome to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness, a podcast where we talk about the Constitution, history, politics, and pretty much anything else I want to talk about. And you can find this podcast on AnnetteTalks.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all the usual places. If you want to see the video, go to youtube.com/Annette Talks, and you can see what these podcasts look like. Today, I have a guest, Connor Boyack. Hi, Connor.
Hi there.
Is it, I knew I did this last time too, was it Boyack or Boyack?
Boys that yak, Boyack.
Boyack. I remember going over and over, which one was it? Anyway, and we are going to be talking about the tension between safety or security and liberty and civil disobedience. So basically what you need to do when things are going too far in the direction of safety or security. And Connor, you are president of Libertas.
That's right.
And that's a think tank in Utah?
Yep.
And you're libertarian?
Yep.
Basically, all right. And also, you're author of some books like this one, Latter-day Liberty, which we talked about last time you were on. And you have Tuttle Twins books, which are for kids, teaching them free market principles and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so you're actively involved in
trying to be
securing and maintaining our liberties. That's why I wanted to have you on for this discussion, because this is where I'm coming from right now. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this is obviously what's been going on with the COVID-19 thing is like the biggest example. It's the only example I can remember in my lifetime that's been this huge of an example of the government sort of instilling fear, and then, the press jumping on and instilling more fear day by day, and then using that as an opportunity to sort of lock everyone down. And, now it's starting to open up. And I almost don't know which is worse for me, watching it lock down or watching these weekly press conferences that our governor has, where he's so graciously allowing us to do just a little bit more every week, right? Like last week, it wasn't safe to go on the playground. This week, it's going to be safe to go on the playground if there's only 10 kids.
Right.
Last week, it wasn't safe to go in the pool. This week, it's going to be safe to have 50% capacity in the pool. And I'm flabbergasted at how many people seem to be invested in this whole fear thing. Like, I talk to people regularly, and so many people want to be afraid of this virus and want to keep everything locked down, or, at least pared down, and wear their masks. And I look around and I'm like, we don't have, I know one person that got really sick. I don't know anyone that died. I don't know why so many people are invested in in this fear and wanting the government to control us in this way.
Part of me feels like, with reality TV and soap operas before that, we as a people, basically psychologically, in the way our brains are wired, it's like a steady dopamine drip of drama, right? We love kind of being hooked into all the drama. And part of me feels like that for some people, they feel like they're living out this, highly dramatic reality TV episode where they're now part of the experience, right? It's like virtual reality, except it's actual reality. So yeah, it is very interesting to see largely ignorant people completely surrender any semblance of their rights and even attack those who try and exercise them and shame them. It has been something else to behold. I think for me, the thing that distinguishes this whole episode above any others that I've witnessed or experienced or know about from recent history, and that is the shaming, the Karen example, right? It isn't just that, like, I am concerned for my family, I've got an elderly grandmother that lives with us, or my husband has respiratory problems, or whatever, we're going to manage, risk differently than most people. No, now it is very much people have taken it upon themselves to socially shame and belittle others who don't feel that they are at high risk, who feel that they should be able to keep their business open or go worship at church or whatever. And the degree to which we've had this kind of lateral shaming from one person to the next, obviously facilitated through social media, has been deeply alarming to me, and makes me really question what the next crisis is going to look like, what the next incident is going to be, where you know, okay, we have kind of this new baseline now of you know, human behavior in our society. Well, what's next? How do we kind of ratchet up next, and what does that look like? So that's something that I'm kind of keenly watching, because it's, I think, very destructive to kind of our social fabric, and certainly our freedoms as well.
It is, and that raises the other thing that was so disturbing about this was all the hotlines were set up to, you know, tattle on your neighbor if your neighbor's coming outside, if your neighbor's walking around without a mask. And I have to touch on the mask thing quickly. I did a whole hour on this because I'm so I get so lit about this issue. But it's one of the problems I have with it is that it is a highly visual indication of where you stand on this. And so if someone sees you outside without a mask, automatically they can, you know, pinpoint, oh, you're the not caring, selfish
Right.
person. And you're in Utah, so I don't think you have the same mask wearing mass that we have here in Colorado. So you probably don't have as much, but it's like that's provided a really handy way for people to right away see who you are and whether you care or not. And
There's
so,
a great term for this, of course, right? It's virtue signaling.
Virtue signaling, yeah. And I've been saying that all along because when we talked about the masks in my episode, we talked about how these are not even proven to be effective, and how it's been going back and forth, like the CDC, the WHO, like, you know, so at first it wasn't effective, then it was effective, and now maybe it's not effective. And yet, if we don't wear them, because we are seeing how illogical the whole thing is, we're bad people. You know, we're not just that we're you know, mistaken. We're bad people, and so that's a dangerous thing to have, that sort of highly visible thing that everyone can just point to right off the bat.
It goes along with the shaming, right? Because if you are one of the non-compliant, if you can be observed that you're not wearing the mask, there is now this visual indicator of someone's compliance with these government edicts. And it's almost as if, you know, there's the quote from, what was it, Norman Vincent Peale or someone like that. He's like, Americans used to roar like lions for liberty, and now they bleat like sheep for safety.
Ugh.
And it's such a relevant quote, right? Because now it's all about submission. Are you sufficiently compliant with the government? Have you submissively you know, bent the knee and kissed the boot like everyone else has? And if not, you must not care as much as I do. And it is very alarming to see people bending over backwards to try and be more obedient to the state than other people, when, good heavens, open a history book. I mean, the state not only is wrong many times, they're experts. As you pointed out, you know, the CDC itself has kind of gone back and forth. The FDA approves all kinds of harmful drugs and doesn't allow other drugs to get on the market that could save people. I mean, we are plagued by experts who are not experts. Like, sure, they have specialized knowledge, but that doesn't mean that they are infallible. It doesn't mean that they're always correct. Experts disagree. So that I think is part of the biggest problem, is that there's like this social conditioning happening where our entire culture is really being transformed. Yeah, right now we're talking about coronavirus and masks, but this is just the latest instantiation of a trend that's been going on for a very long time. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to, you know, wake up. I think the Matrix, like close to scripture, like the Matrix is like the most scriptural, not non-religious scriptural thing that we have. Why? Because I think it describes society so well. I think for those who have seen the movie, and I'm, you know, if you haven't, you've had 20 years to, so I think I can.
Right. No spoiler here.
Right. And so, you know, Neo is just woken up, and Morpheus is trying to help him understand the real versus the virtual. He takes him into the little pretend, you know, Matrix simulation. They're walking by a group of people, and Morpheus is explaining that these are the minds of the people that we're trying to save. But they can be anyone. They can be a teacher, a police officer, whatever. It's like, but you have to be careful, because these people are so deeply ingrained in the system. They are so inured, he used that word, so dependent upon the system, that they will fight you when you try and basically liberate them. The very people that Neo and Morpheus are trying to help have become so ingratiated with the system of slavery and dependence and everything that has captivated the human race, that they are fighting against their own liberators, right? Because they don't know any better. So I feel like so much that describes the culture that we're in, that people have become so kind of deeply intertwined with the state, and I think it spells trouble.
Yeah, it's the first time I've ever felt like there's potential for us to go the way of World War II Germany. Like, I never thought that, I read a Nazi Germany book just recently, a few months ago, right before this whole thing happened, ironically. And I remember thinking, just the feeling that you get, because this was based on all true stories, and the feeling that you got of this sort of, fear, the whole place was just, everyone was afraid. And they were afraid of their neighbors, they were afraid of their friends, they were afraid of everyone. And I just thought, I don't know how people live in a system of fear like that. And so now to experience this is the closest we've ever been. Not only is it the fear that you have when you walk around and see everyone in masks, they're all afraid. I
Right.
used this analogy before, but it reminds me of Close Encounters, when they're up on the hill, and everyone's got the gas masks on because the
Hmm.
government told them. They purposely orchestrated this to keep people off the hill, said that there was like a gas leak, and so the air
Hmm.
is bad. But Richard Dreyfuss takes his mask off. He's like, there's nothing wrong with the air. And every time I go out for a walk and I see people in masks, I want to say, there's nothing wrong with the air, people. And
Especially for the people who are driving a car
by
by
the,
themselves,
I
wearing a mask, windows rolled up, and it's like, what are
what,
you doing?
or
Like,
even, when I go into a store where they require a mask, I will put one on because the store's allowed to require that. But if I'm in an aisle by myself, the thing comes off because
hmm
who am I protecting? But it's almost like you're not supposed to even do that. You should not be thinking this through. You should
yeah,
just comply. The mask should be on. And partly I feel like the mask has become so symbolic because what it is you have half of the country that says, let's just open up. This is ridiculous. This is not, very few of us are going to die from this. This is ridiculous. Open up. And then the other half is saying, no, 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 stay locked down, stay locked down. We're scared. And so the mask has become the compromise, is what the left thinks. We've agreed to come out if everyone will wear masks. And so when some of us don't want to, like, oh, you're going back on this compromise. It's like,
sure.
I didn't make this compromise. I can look around and see that it's illogical to have to wear a mask everywhere. It's illogical to be afraid of this. So why would I want to purposely live in fear all the time? And so it's just, I think you're probably onto something when you say that's the drama, that people like it, because otherwise, why are they so emotionally invested in something that's not dangerous? I mean, it's like this much dangerous. When this whole thing started, the first 2 weeks, I thought, we're going to see people in ambulances coming through this, picking up people, like bring out your dead kind of scenario. Like
Right.
because that's the way they were
That's
acting.
how
Like,
it's portrayed.
we're
Yeah.
going to lose a third or a half of our people. But here we are several months in, and it's obviously not happening. And yet people are still acting like, second wave, we're going to have a second wave. Like, they're all emotionally
You got to
invested in
stay
that.
more scared, right? It
Yeah.
very much, I think, the division I've seen is those who want to control other people and those who try to just focus on their own, lives and not control people. There very much is this almost fetish, I'll use the word, for trying to dictate how other people behave. We see it all the time in city councils and communities where it's like, I don't think you should be able to do Airbnb, or I don't think you should be able to paint your fence that color. And it's like, those are other people's rights, other people's property. What is it to you? And yet the political process is such that individuals can foist their desires upon other people. The tyranny of the majority is very, very alive and well here in America. And I feel like that's so often what is happening in this situation as well, that you have these people who think that everyone should be wearing masks, everyone should be sheltered, they should shut down their businesses, so on and so forth. And so they want to use the political process and social pressure and so forth to control those people, because they don't, maybe as individuals, want to manage their own risk appropriately. They don't want to, research the issue more. They don't want to, just deal with the risks and go about their life. They would prefer to boss everyone else around until the point where they themselves feel safe and satisfied that, they are at less risk. It's just a crazy notion, but that's the division that I see, is very much this kind of control freak mentality, boss other people around, versus like live and let live, let me go about my business. Yeah, I don't want to infect anyone. Yeah, I don't want to be like having crazy risks or whatever, but there's risks all the time. Like, I might hit someone in my car because I yawn too much, right? But I still get in my car. And and someone else might hit me, but you know, all things considered, it's worth the risk. It's a calculated risk. And you know, freedom is there's the Thomas Jefferson quote about how
I prefer
timid
dangerous freedom over
yes
safe slavery or something like that.
timid men prefer the calm of despotism to the tempestuous sea of liberty. Liberty is
Mm-hmm.
never guaranteed to be smooth sailing,
Mm-hmm.
right? It can be pretty chaotic waters because people are each acting in ways that they want, and sometimes you bump up against someone. But to have the calm, to have someone come in and smooth things over, you have despotism. You have to
Mm-hmm.
suppress everyone's individual rights, and I just don't want to live in that type of world.
Yeah, you know, when this thing started, even in the, I don't know, second or third week, my feeling was, well, the logic was, okay, so we know that older people and people with compromised immune systems or underlying conditions are at risk. So why don't we just keep them home?
Hmm.
Like that's, you know, and it's funny, that made too much sense. For some reason, that wasn't, you know, what we went with. But a few weeks ago, I posted, I shared an article, and it had a report that was written by 4 doctors that were also, I think, epidemiologists. I can never say that word, epidemiologists. Anyway, they basically went through a potential scenario like what we're in, where there is a virus that becomes a pandemic. And they said, well, these are the things that we can do. And they listed out all the things that we've done. And at the end, they basically said, you shouldn't do any of those things. They would be disastrous. You would lose essential services for people. People would freak out, whatever. Like, don't shut down the churches. Don't shut down activities. Like, it was really interesting. Don't do any of those things. Just isolate the people that are older and quarantine the ill. Like, why? Why on earth did we not follow that? Like, this was 2016. I mean, why would we shift over and say, no, 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 we're totally going to be, you know, locked down, and you know, no one's going to be at risk at all. We're not going to have any risk. We're going to go 100% safety.
There's a silver lining to every dark cloud. And, you know, I remember when Common Core first passed, it was the best recruiting engine for homeschooling that I had seen in a
Yeah.
long time, right? Same thing right now. Like maybe keep the conversation for just a moment in the same context of of education and homeschooling. Here you shut down all the schools, even though kids aren't at risk at all.
Mhm.
And you send everyone home for this like crisis schooling, quasi homeschooling type experience where parents are now being like, well, wait a minute, my kid can get through all of their like educational stuff in 2 hours. Why are they at school for 6 or 7 hours? Or,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, my kid is so much happier because he's not being bullied anymore at school, and he just enjoys life way more. Maybe I shouldn't send him back to school. And now I see that, like, you know, I can do this as a parent, and we've figured out how to, you know, make a balance with work and all that kind of stuff. And so for all of the downsides to what's happened and all the many objections I have and you share, um, I can't help but see, for example, just in education, how there have been 3 polls in the past few weeks showing at least 30, but up to 40 or 50% of parents are saying that they're more likely to homeschool now. Now, when the time comes to pull the trigger, right, I don't think that many actually do it.
Mhm.
It's very enticing to have free babysitting so that you can have more time in your day and so forth. But if even a fraction of that, if even 5% decide to homeschool, that is millions of kids coming out of the public school system. That has a long-lasting impact. That
Mhm.
has such a transformative opportunity, let alone the broader effects of what the government is doing right now in overplaying its hand. I do believe, like you, that a lot of people are waking up to this nonsense, and they're seeing yet another example, because there have been many in past years and decades, but this one is so glaring because it so deeply impacts all of us because of the way our lives have been totally kind of upended, and it's really created an interrupt mentally where we have to be like, oh, well, wait, what's going on? What do I think about that? Rather than just another thing on the news that we can kind of scroll past on our phones. And I think by overplaying their hand, the government has become a great recruiting arm for, you know, people who believe in liberty and
Mhm.
freedom and want to focus on the problems that, you know, government has, and what do we do about them, and how do we change in our lives. I just think that it's a very stark contrast that is going to have a lingering effect of people who have experienced this, who see the government flip-flopping and overplaying their hand, and question the next time something like this happens, well, I don't believe you anymore, so I'm
Yeah.
going to not wear a mask, or I'm going to keep my business open, or I'm going to go to church, or I'm going to, whatever it is. And I just think that's healthy. As negative as all this stuff is, I welcome more people kind of being woken up to the reality of what's going on.
Right. And that will segue us into the next section of our discussion. But as a little aside note, what's funny is we know that it's not really about the virus when all these protests that turn into looting and riots, they're okay. They can have, those are essential. It's funny that our governor, he actually said that. I am now, like you said, being woken up. I'm already very aware, but now I'm attending every town hall. I'm watching the press conferences that the governor puts on, because I'm keeping track. Okay, what's allowed next? Because I'm doing it. But yeah, he said, oh, it's, these protests are essential. So I hope that they wear masks, I'm like, but there was no talk of social distancing, because that's not happening. So, because obviously if this really was as dangerous as they were saying, those things would be getting shut down like that. And
The First
obviously,
Amendment is essential when it comes to protesting, but the
yes,
First Amendment apparently is not essential when it comes to worshiping your God. So,
yes, I know. That's one of the things I kept thinking was, well, maybe we can go to church if we all have signs, protesting something. If all of our signs said Black Lives Matter, we would be able to go to church, no problem.
yeah.
But, and obviously we're for being able to go out and protest. And that didn't apply to us that went out and protested this whole thing. Oh no, we were all shamed for that. You're selfish. That was just so funny. They're out there without masks. That was the biggest thing that we would hear. One of the jokes was that, from one of my libertarian friends, is we should be wearing masks to these protests, because then they can't identify us. So, if we use it against them.
Or if you're going to wear a mask, make it like one of those V for Vendetta masks,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I'm wearing a mask, but
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
virtue signaling in a totally different way than you.
This cuts both ways. But anyway, so obviously this is going to happen again. And there's been a lot of conditioning that people have gone along with and accepted. And so it won't take much. I don't know if it'll be another virus or, maybe a natural disaster or something. Something will happen where the government will again step in and immediately try and take a bunch of our liberties away. So the question is, what do we do? Is civil disobedience something that we need to start getting ready to do? And what does that mean? What does that look like? When my sister was in town, she had all her kids. I said, we're going to be civil disobedient and we're going to put all our kids on the playground, because the playgrounds are closed. That's dangerous. So you're under too many rules when it's civil disobedience to let your kids play on the playground.
Right.
That wasn't much. That wasn't like,
These are good questions, though, because you're right to point out that this is cyclical. This is not an isolated event. Stuff like this has happened before. Stuff like this will happen in the future. This one is very significant because the degree to which the response affected so many people, shut down so many businesses, threw the economy into a lurch, and yeah. So this is definitely kind of a degree of difference from what we've experienced, but the principle is the same. When you go back and look throughout history, it is very clear that an ignorant people is very easily manipulated. When people do not understand, think of it this way. If I have a piece of property, just say my home, and my neighbor starts to put out lawn furniture and other things on his property, but then inches closer and closer and starts putting it on my property and effectively extending his front yard into my own. If I don't know where the property boundary is, how in the world can I check his advance and make sure that he doesn't encroach on my property? It's essential that you understand the boundaries of what your rights are, that you understand what the First Amendment means, that you understand what our individual freedoms actually are, what justice is, what proper law is. These concepts are very important just so that we can understand when they are being violated, that we understand what the threshold is above which, yes, maybe then we need to consider civil disobedience. But if we are ignorant, if we just don't understand, then we are more easily, moved about with every, wind of political doctrine, right? Of like, oh, we're going to do this. And okay, well, I don't know any better, so I guess that's okay. But if you are well versed in, your individual rights, if you're well versed in some basic legal concepts, it's much more easy to be able to kind of compare and contrast and say, well, that's not okay. That's not acceptable. The mayor doesn't have that authority, or The governor doesn't have that authority. So I think education is very critical. And I hate that answer in the sense that, oh, we all need to be educated, but that doesn't provide any like actionable steps for any of your listeners. Like, okay, great, I need to get educated. Like, what do I do about that? And so I put together a book a few years ago called Feardom, How Politicians Exploit Your Emotions and What You Can Do to Stop Them, because I had seen this trend over the years and wanted to kind of compile one resource that someone could read to say, I want to understand what's happening so that next time it happens, I am not easily, manipulated. I want to kind of break the loop and get out of it so that I can kind of maintain my freedoms and act independently and not be just kind of led along by, whatever politician's trying to take advantage of me. We have to get to a point where we are not easily manipulated, where we are not scared. It's the whole boy who cried wolf scenario, right? It's like, when he cries wolf and the townspeople don't know any better, they're freaked out because they think that there's a wolf upon them. But after a while, they begin to see a pattern and they begin to gain information and thereby be able to scrutinize this boy and his lying through his teeth so that they can modify their behavior and no longer believe him and thereby no longer be afraid by his kind of manipulation tactics and so forth. That's very analogous to the lives that we lead and the situation that we have with our politicians and media. Not that they're all horrible and all corrupt and things like that. However, there are clear patterns that you can see. And especially in times of crisis, our mainstream media, by and large, does not do any really aggressive independent journalism. They are not skeptics when it comes to the government. They carry the government's water. And so when the government wants to embellish or manufacture something or avoid talking about something, the media is very compliant. So then the people who rely on those sources for their information are more easily manipulated because they're kept in the dark and they don't know. So Feardom, I would say, is a great first start for someone wanting to kind of understand this pattern, understand how they can kind of break the loop in their own lives. Because you're right to point out that something like this is going to happen again. Look at the TSA, for example. 9/11 happened, and then there was the underwear bomber. And so now not only do we have the TSA, but now TSA, puts their fingers inside our pants from time to time. Why? Well, because of the underwear bomber. This one incident that happened in this one place, and suddenly that gives pretext to make sure that, there might be, C4 explosives and someone.
We all get felt up at the airport now. Yeah.
Right. And then there was the shoe bomber. So we have to take off our shoes. It's like, how yeah, I was going to share something pretty graphic, but I won't. But the point is like, someone chooses to do something one way and then we all suffer for it, right? And now you go to the airport and people might grumble or whatever, but by and large, they're socially conditioned to be compliant and go along with it. And they don't understand, what is the Fourth Amendment? They don't understand, is travel right or is it a privilege? And they don't understand a lot of these things. So we as a public are just kind of, carried along for the ride in the destruction of our liberties. So I think it's very important for all of us to do a little reading. And once we're a little more educated, then it comes time to start evaluating, when do we speak out? When do we resist? When do we comply? When do we choose not to?
Yeah, and now when you go to the airport, it's not only all these stuff through TSA, but you're going to have to wear masks. And I'll bet you that's going to go on for a very long time. And that's the other problem with masks, is that it's sort of it encourages a herd mentality. Oh, I see a person over there without one. Oh, I see two people. And that's going to go on for a long time.
Yeah.
It's going to be months and months before we can walk around without seeing, a lot of people in masks. So reading, being educated. I mean, a lot of people don't even realize what's in the First Amendment. So they don't even know that their right to assemble has totally been violated and continues to be violated right now. And so what else? Let's just say that this happened again. It was another virus, because that easily could come along, and they decide to shut things down. And we all have been woken up and we realize this is not okay. Like, just going against the dictates, or,
Well, look what happened in Texas when, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but, the salon owner decided to open up her business and she was put in jail. And what happened? It was a game of chicken. The Texas governor came out and said, oh, with my order, I didn't intend anyone to go to jail. I just, wanted everyone to do this. And so I'm
Mhm.
going to modify my order to say that there's no penalty of jail time. Right. So civil disobedience, I mean, it sounds like defiant and all this kind of stuff, but it's really an educational act. It is someone who is willing to say, you know what, the emperor has no clothes, and I'm gonna show that for everyone to see. I'm willing to incur a consequence. I'm willing to spend a couple days in jail. I'm willing to,
Mhm.
land on TV because the cops show up or whatever, because I want other people to see the clear injustice. I want people to understand the problems that are happening, and it takes someone who's willing to go through that, to provide the public an opportunity to see the full weight of the government enforcement come to bear on a person in the wrong way. And so in Texas, that was a great example, because immediately the governor buckled and he's like, no, I didn't intend for this to happen. I've seen many other examples where things kind of escalate, the cops show up or whatever, and the charges are never filed. They don't intend to prosecute these things. They don't
Mhm.
want to so imagine if more people did that and really
Mhm.
kind of push the boundaries around, hey, government, what are you actually intending to do here? Because all of these mandates are backed up by force. Do you intend to rough people up? Do you intend to fill the jails with people who don't wear masks or who open their businesses? And so I think, finding a critical mass of people who are willing to just live their lives the way they want and exercise their essential freedoms. And man, if this stuff is ever challenged in court, like, I can't imagine anyone losing by simply
Yeah.
saying, I have, think of it this way: in the criminal context, in our system of government, we are presumed innocent, at least in theory, until proven guilty, right? And the burden is on the government to show that. So people, by and large, are presumed innocent. The problem we've seen right now with coronavirus is it's really flipped. People are presumed guilty in a health context. You're all
Mhm.
asymptomatic carriers and anyone might be diseased. That's why we have to shut everything down. So everyone is presumed guilty in that
Mhm.
sense, unless and until we have a way to prove people innocent, whether with antibody testing or vaccinations or whatever, right? And that is the pretext upon which all of these aggressive government actions have been have occurred, is out of this notion that everyone is potentially infectious, everyone is an asymptomatic carrier or potentially so, and everyone is guilty. Therefore, we need to broadly target the American public rather than narrowly deal with the specific cases. And that is where the government could be justified from a public health standpoint, is to say, oh, you've manifested these symptoms, we're going to put you under quarantine, and we're going to contact the people that you've come in
Right.
contact with. And like, when you narrowly with a scalpel try and deal with the issue rather than bringing a sledgehammer to our entire economy, things are much better when you can narrow it that way. That would be a proper response rather than these broad punishments. Because as you point out, like 50% capacity in a pool, or meeting with a dozen people, well, why not 13 people? Why not 52% capacity? These are
Right.
totally arbitrary edicts that aren't backed by science. And so when they go broad like this, they just lose any scientific ground, moral foundation, legal basis. And so that's where I think anytime this stuff is happening, it's up to us to say, well, I'm just going to go about and live my life. I'm going to go, open my business, or I'm going to go gather with some people at our church. And I'm willing to, incur whatever consequence comes from living my essential freedoms. But again, a lot of people don't like to be contentious. They certainly don't want to spend a day in jail. Like, so, if people aren't willing to pay the price to fight injustice, then injustice is what we get. So it's really kind of a tough question for each of us to
Yeah.
say, when is it appropriate? When are we willing to stand up and say, no, I'm going to do what I feel is right?
Right. We actually had a successful push here. Restaurants were really hard hit. I feel very bad for restaurant owners, but there were 600 restaurants that finally got together and said, we're just opening. We don't care. It was a Memorial Day weekend. And magically restaurants were allowed to open as soon as that was published. So that's a prime example. If you can get enough people to agree, like, we're all in this together, let's just do it, then you're going to be more successful that way too.
Mm-hmm.
But so it does sound like it comes down to educating yourself, knowing your rights, taking a calculated risk, knowing, yeah, you may end up in jail, but yeah, you're probably not going to be prosecuted. And if anything, you're going to end up on a podcast. Like I had the guy on he was arrested in the park for playing t-ball with his daughter.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, right here in Colorado. We were on for over an hour because he wanted to tell his story, because he would get little snippets on the news, 2 minutes here, 2 minutes there. But yeah, they're not going to prosecute him. I ended up apologizing to him, and now they're on the run because he's going to sue them. So it sounds like people need to get that spirit of courage back again, and realize that liberty comes with a price, and that sometimes we just have to be willing to pay that price.
I agree.
And so I really hope that now people can see, safety and liberty. Safety should be down here, liberty should be pushing it down, shouldn't be the other way around. And so when we start feeling like we are being encroached on, like we have been these last few months, way too much, that we have to start being willing to speak. I mean, I've been speaking up the town hall meetings and, on Facebook, of course, and going on the playground, but not doing too much more than that. But I'm thinking if this happens again, I'm ready to do something more, because I cannot hand this off to my kids. My kids are not, I'll tell you one thing, my kids are not going to school in masks in the fall. That's not happening. So, if that means homeschooling, I'm homeschooling, even though I really don't want to do it. But yeah, I think we need to draw a line in the sand at some point. So
I agree. And that line looks differently, for every person, but I think it is, at a minimum, it's something for us to think very seriously about. How far am I willing to go? To what extent am I willing to have my rights, violated for no good reason? Is it when I can't go to church? Is it when my business gets shut down? Is it when I'm, confined to home and I want to go play at the park with my kids? Like we might write those off as like, oh, those are things I can do without for a while. It's really not that big of a deal, but they are kind of indicative of much broader things. If the government can prevent you from going to church, if the government can shut down your business, if the government can prohibit you from associating with other people, under First Amendment, free association, then what's next, right? If they've been able to get away with it with this thing, then what about the next thing? And that's where I think we really, really need to be cautious about what's happening right now, and keenly paying attention. You talked about Nazi Germany, and I really don't like myself to throw around comparisons or say, oh, we're going to get there, but it's very instructive to look into how they went from kind of point A to point B. And we think that, Hitler was just this person that brought everyone along. And but there's a fantastic book called And They Thought They Were Free by Milton Mayer. And he was a Jewish man. He was a journalist. He's an American. And he wanted to get to the root of that question. Why is it that so many Germans went along with Hitler, supported Hitler? How were they able to transform society? He interviewed people from kind of all walks of life in Germany, and some fascinating quotes emerged from that. Just these average people who kind of got whipped up into the fervor and were supportive of the Nazi regime and so forth. And what they said, a couple of people really stood out, was we never objected to the first incident. Therefore, when the second incident happened, which was only a tiny bit worse, we couldn't object to that because we didn't object to the prior one. So why would we object to this? And so on until things were very atrocious. But by then we had become so desensitized, these people said, to what had been happening, and we had silenced ourselves so much that we were unable to speak at that point. And so it really is a testament, I think, to pointing out the little instances. Yeah, it's not critical that we be able to go play at the park with our kids. Like, the world is not going to end if we can't go to the park for a few weeks. But you know what? The pretext that is set there when the government can exercise this power, that is the problem. And if it's left unchecked, if we do not speak out, then what happens when the next thing happens? It's a little bit worse and a little bit worse. And so that's why I think it's critical, again, going back to the education and being aware and being willing to, I mean, I just kept coming to work and I kept living my normal life while everyone else was cowering at home and, masking themselves in gloves and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, you know what, until there's like something that I can readily see that's a problem, then, I'm going to continue to live the way I think I ought to, because I know the government lies and overplays their hands and manipulates data and the experts are wrong. And so why should I restrict myself unless there's kind of a clear and present danger or clear evidence to do so? So anyways, I just feel that so much of this is incremental. We've seen kind of a bigger jump, I think, with some of this COVID-19 stuff. But if we're not speaking out and objecting to things now, are we really going to when they get just a little bit worse and a little bit worse? And I think no. If the Nazi Germany example is, suggesting how human nature is, it's not that Germans are any substantively different than people all around the world. So I think there's lessons there for us to pay attention to.
Yes, it's like the frog thrown into the pot of water.
Sure.
And at first it's cool, and then it heats up and heats up and heats up. Well, if you don't get out when it's hot, you're toast. So, well, thank you very much. This has been very instructive. And so I hope my audience will go and find the book Feardom. Is it on Amazon or?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on Kindle and it's on audio, whatever the audio is, Audible and Kindle and paperback.
Awesome. I'm going to get it today because I didn't know it existed until right now. So I'm excited to get that. And I hope everyone will really think about this. One of the things that I did when I had my kids homeschooling was we learned the Constitution. We had a little Constitution quiz over dinner every night. And so if nothing else came of that happened. And obviously they weren't learning it at school because I had to teach it to them. So I want everyone to educate themselves on what their liberties are and critically think through all of this. When you feel yourself getting caught up in the fear and the herd mentality, stop, look around, critically think through this, and do not just blindly go along, because we don't want the herd mentality. We don't want to lose our freedoms here in this country permanently, and that's always a real risk. So let's all pay attention to what's going on, and please, please, please err on the side of liberty and not safety. All right, thank you, Connor.
Amen. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And everyone, thank you for listening to Annette on Life, Liberty, and Happiness. Again, can be found on AnnetteTalks.com, iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube. Please go comment. Let me know what you think about this. If they want to reach you, Connor, can they reach you through ConnorBoyack.com or?
Yep, ConnorBoyack.com, or just Google me or find me on social media. I'm very easy to find.
You are. And I like your Facebook posts. They're fun.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks for listening.